Good evening and welcome to a new edition of To The Point. This evening we'll be shedding light on the escalating situation in Syria. Lots of mixed statements and different reactions to yesterday's opposition meeting. Russia has a position, the United States has a position, and the question is the American media and the European media, what is their position vis-a-vis a lot of news that is recently being published about the situation in Syria will be under discussion in a few moments with a distinguished gentleman. Before we do so, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi held a meeting earlier in the day, the first time actually that the president has held. The meeting is with the Higher Council for Tourism. The meeting was attended by a number of officials. With us on the line is Mrs. Umayma Hussein, spokesperson from the Ministry of Tourism. Mrs. Umayma, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Could you just shed light on the nature of the meeting? Because it's been quite some time since an Egyptian president met with the Higher Council, actually.
Yeah, this is very true, and this is the first meeting for the Higher Council for Tourism. It was held this morning, and there were a few items on the agenda that needed to be pressed upon. Mainly 7 components have been discussed this morning. Most importantly was the electronic visa and its impact on the flow, actually on the flow of the tourism movement to Egypt.
Okay.
So this has been discussed. They had also discussed the facilitation of implementation of electronic visas, actually, and making it available to the GCC countries, to both residents, actually, and their escorts. Mm-hmm. They also discussed some policies regarding the open skies, and this is, of course, I mean, it's an open file between us and the Ministry of Aviation. Mm-hmm. They have also discussed some particular programs, such as the program of the Holy Family, Journey of the Holy Family in Egypt, which is being revived now, and we have finished a few areas and locations that the Holy Family had already visited. They had also discussed a very important program that we are also implementing jointly with the Ministry of Aviation, which is the Tour and Cure, and this has to do with curing virus C. Mm-hmm. The last point I can think of now would be actually the prices. I mean the rates at Egyptian hotels. That there has to be a minimum, actually, for the rates that we should not go below, because you need to assure that our guests are getting kind of quality services. Mm-hmm. So this cannot be done in light of just low prices or prices actually that don't match the value of the Egyptian destination.
Mm-hmm. How are we forecasting tourism pattern in Egypt? I mean, there are lots of open files, lots of countries that have issued kind of warnings about coming to Egypt. Can we see that maybe in the future this will change, and the motion of tourism, will it be more active?
Well, I have to see that we are seeing the changes coming.
Yes.
The Russians had just actually issued a statement, and they had a video on the Egyptian tightening to the security measures at all Egyptian airports, specifically Cairo and Sharm el-Sheikh, because these are the two most frequented airports by Russians. Mm-hmm. And same for Hurghada. And this video already has been out, and we can see that the negotiations, are taking course. They have been taking course for a year now, and they have asked for some tightening up of security measures and introduction of certain X-rays. And so long as this does not conflict with any of the Egyptian surveillance techniques and so forth and so on, we have agreed to many of the stuff they had asked for. And I think we've met the requirements, and that's why we can see, I mean, that the Russian tourists will be flocking back in the near future. We haven't been given a certain date for that, but whatever is happening now actually gives us indications that we're on the right track.
What about the question of marketing Egypt? Because we're supposed to be, or are we actually working on maybe changing the imaging? We have a lot of problems in this region that are even affecting us. Are we doing anything on this end? The president was recently in Aswan, and he was talking about converting that area into the capital, an economic and touristic and a cultural capital as well, or a hub. Has anything with regards to that issue been discussed today?
I'm not really sure if this has been discussed today, but I could tell that many of the points that I had just shed some light upon, definitely, I mean, it took the discussions to what you're talking about now. But at any rate, I mean, the Ministry of Tourism is definitely working on that. We're working with one of the biggest international advertising and PR companies. And we're very much working on the perception of Egypt and how people and how other nations see it abroad. Because as you said, I mean, it's not just a problem of Egypt, but it's a problem of the whole region. So definitely that's making it a bit more difficult. And also it doesn't have only to do with the Ministry of Tourism, but it has to do with re-imaging the whole country. So it's not only about the tourism industry, but we have to work closely with all other ministries, especially the concerned one or the ones that are involved with us in tourism, whether it's the Ministry of Interior, Foreign Affairs, Culture, Antiquities. So it has to be a re-imaging, I mean, of the Egyptian brand.
Yes.
This, of course, I mean, will take some time and will take lots of money. So we're just working slowly but surely on that.
Ms. Umayma, thank you very much for your fruitful input, and we indeed wish you the very best of luck. Tourism is one of the major sectors here in Egypt, and suffice it to say, Egypt is considered maybe the largest open door or outdoor museum in the world, and one of the oldest civilization worldwide, which attracts a lot of people from different walks of life. This evening we'll be shedding light on the situation in Syria. With us this evening is Mr. Amr Elmasry, former Middle East News Agency Bureau Chief in Ankara. A pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, ma'am.
Let me start with the latest and then go back. And maybe the latest is we see a pattern of escalation in Western media with regards to how the titles that we read today about the assassination of opposition. And I cannot help but maybe go back to the fact that a few hours ago we hear Trump supporting the Syrian government, supporting the Syrian sovereignty, and asking for a resolution of that conflict and standing behind the Syrians. And yet the media, it seems, because maybe they're not on the same wavelength since the election campaign, are adamant to draw quite a different picture. Am I incorrect in my reading, or is this...
You're right, ma'am.
The inner feelings are surfacing.
You're right, ma'am. Apparently, there's a very profound problem between U.S. President Donald Trump and the U.S. media, the U.S. mainstream media.
Yes.
That was so clear in many positions where Mr. Trump openly criticized some media outlets and their representatives, and even declined to answer their questions in front of the whole world. So there must be a very deep problem between Mr. Trump and the U.S. media, or the Western media in general. And of course, Mr. Trump has announced before that he is totally apathetic about Syria, and he's not interested in Bashar al-Assad, in as much as he is much more interested in fighting terrorist groups and Daesh on top of them, and also Jabhat al-Nusra or al-Nusra Front. Now it's called Fath al-Sham. This is the new name of Jabhat al-Nusra. So there is a new style of American intervention in the world, especially in hotspots like Syria and Libya. Let's say Syria in specific, there are so deep rifts between opposition groups now. That has overshadowed their presence in the Astana conference in Kazakhstan. And we hear every now and then Mr. Trump speaking about the need to fight terrorism. That is so clear in all his messages.
Who is the Syrian opposition, in your point of view? Because people on the are saying that what we see in the media and what is being labeled as the Syrian opposition has to be Syrian.
No one knows.
But most of them are not Syrian.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
That's from people that are actually on the ground. They're saying that most of those who are allegedly the opposition, they don't carry Syrian passports.
Yes. Yes, many of them, and that's what Mr. Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian president, or the Syrian government in general, has asked as one of its conditions for a ceasefire or to reach an agreement in Syria, is to push out the foreign fighters from Syrian territories. There are a lot of foreign fighters, as we know, from Chechnya, from all Arab countries, from Saudi Arabia, from Egypt, from Tunisia. They are all carrying weapons, and they are mistakenly named as Syrian moderate opposition. Perhaps maybe some major powers are including countries in the region like Turkey, they are speaking about moderate opposition, moderate Syrian opposition.
Yes.
So they are not even moderate. Even the Free Syrian Army is carrying weapons. If they are speaking about the Free Syrian Army, it's also a faction that is carrying weapons on the ground and fighting against Bashar al-Assad's regime.
Yes. Can you say we can reach a stage whereby we would reunite the Syrian rank and file? And when I say reunite the Syrian rank and file, I'm talking about the Syrians. I'm not talking about the opposition that has been paid to go out there, meddle, and divide and conquer.
Yes.
Can this actually happen? Can we go back to the old Syria again?
Yes, I mean, it's
and give the Syrians the right to pick their government, to hold free elections. I mean, it's a sovereign right of the Syrian people. Nobody can impose a government or a regime, but it's their right. But can we reach this stage whereby they unite and go to the polling station? Let's put it that way.
Yes, that's what the Syrian government wanted and announced. I mean, they even rejected, the Syrian government rejected any interference in Syrian affairs, or speaking about preconditions of removing President Bashar al-Assad from power. No one has the right to say this from outside Syria, especially Turkey. that is playing a major role in the Syrian chaos for the 6th year now. I mean, Turkey, as well as some Gulf states in the region, are financing terrorist groups fighting against President Bashar al-Assad. This is the legitimate government. This is the legitimate government that has ambassadors, Syrian ambassadors everywhere in the world, including Turkey itself. They have Syrian consul in Istanbul. They have Syrian ambassadors in the United States, in Russia, elsewhere.
Yes. The meeting which took place in Kazakhstan, what do you think it led to?
We have to know in the beginning that this meeting was not meant to discuss political issues. It's originally a military nature.
Yes.
Only seeking to reach an implementation, a strong implementation on the ground of a ceasefire.
Yes.
They want to make sure also that a mechanism monitoring this ceasefire is in place.
Why should this ceasefire be different from the other meetings that address the issue of ceasefire?
The other meetings were of political nature. This meeting of Astana, in the Kazakh capital of Astana, is not meant to discuss major political issues. They are leaving it for the bigger conference of Geneva in Switzerland. I mean, this conference in Astana is only meant to stop the warring factions for a while. And that's what Turkey wants, by the way. Some political analysts
It wants a ceasefire.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
It wants to prove to Russia that it still has some influence in Syria. And some political analysts spoke about a deal between Turkey and Syria. Turkey gave up Aleppo in return for allowing it to have control in northern Syrian areas to fight the Kurds of Syria and the Kurds of Mr. Saleh Muslim, the Syrian Kurdish party there. And he is even incurring losses in his soldiers in the Turkish army. Some say that it reached more than 40 now, 40 casualties.
Yes. Should we have a ceasefire? And I'm saying, should we have a ceasefire? Because we've had so many agreements in the past, and will it pave the way to negotiations, do you think?
Yes, of course. I mean, 6 years of bloodshed is too much for any country.
Indeed, it's too much for Syria. But is it too much for those who are adamant on dividing that country?
Of course not. They are not losing anything.
How long has the conflict in Iraq been? It's definitely more than the 6 years.
Yeah, of course. But Syria is more chaotic. I mean, the situation in Syria is unbearable. About 250, they say about 500,000 now people were killed, and millions have been rendered homeless in many countries.
Yes.
Displaced, yes, and they are now immigrants everywhere. This is not good. I think the Syrian government also needs a break to rally its ranks again. And they say that Erdogan has some objective from this conference, is to allow the forces fighting President Bashar al-Assad to regroup again. I mean, Erdogan has a very wily objective from this ceasefire, so he is interested in this, and he wants to.
So what? It's a boost of energy for those for the opposition.
Exactly.
Slow down, get your act together, get your equipment back again, and then.
Exactly.
Continue wave 2 or wave.
That's what Turkish political.
Will the United States allow this? Because the reason I'm saying this is because the United States under Obama's administration was supporting that trend.
Yes.
Now Trump has singing quite a different tune.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Will he allow it?
We have to know, ma'am, that
Or will he support it?
the United States now in Syria has no role, especially in Astana. The United States is not a part of this conference, and Turkey is happy about this. At least it's not sad, because Erdogan has been speaking openly against the United States support for the Kurds in northern Syria. And that's how, this is partly why Erdogan gave up his cooperation with the United States and is now very close, in close relationship with Russia and Mr. Vladimir Putin. So Erdogan is not very sad about the absence of a U.S. role.
But who is Putin supporting? Putin is not supporting the opposition.
No, of course not. Of course not. Turkey and Russia have totally different agendas in Syria. But Erdogan has no other choice but to cooperate with Mr. Putin, as they have reached this agreement together. And as I said before, some say or claim that there has been some deal between Putin and Erdogan. Erdogan would give up Aleppo in return for having some influence in northern Syrian bars to fight the Kurds there.
Can Erdogan afford to go back on the deal he made on the table?
No, he's not in a position to do this. Erdogan's position now is so weak politically, he has to succumb to Russian requests and demands. And now
does this have to do with the fact that the situation in the United States is different? Can this be a
yes, and of course everyone is now watching the new administration in the United States and adjusting their positions on the U.S. new position now. But this is not very much applicable to some Gulf states. I mean, a country like Saudi Arabia is still adamant about removing Bashar al-Assad from power, and of course Qatar. And they have to do this because they have already paid billions of dollars from their people's money only to bring down Bashar al-Assad. So it's a very complicated situation in Syria, but everyone...
But now that the powers have spoken, will this happen?
Sorry?
Now that the powers have spoken.
Yes.
Supporting Bashar al-Assad. Not Bashar al-Assad because of Bashar al-Assad, but supporting the legitimacy of the elected government.
Yes.
Will this be changed by any Gulf country or any other party?
When the United States says something, I mean countries like in the Gulf area.
Well, the United States, the new United States said something. Trump is in support of
and what
the government, not the opposition.
What Mr. Trump said, everyone has said it before. I mean, what after Bashar al-Assad? What's the possibility after Bashar al-Assad? If Bashar al-Assad went off power
what was
today,
the possibility after Saddam Hussein?
Yes. Iraq is a case in point. I mean, even what they call the Syrian opposition is divided on itself. There is no clear figure or a leader we can see as an alternative for Mr. Assad. I mean, Trump has said the right thing. If we now drove away Bashar al-Assad today, what would be the alternative? What would be the future of Syria? These questions must be answered before speaking about any removal of Bashar al-Assad from power.
The problem with the situation in Syria and in other boiling points in this region, Syria, Libya, what have you, is the terrorist pockets that have been created, not only to dismantle the country in which they are existing right now, but also to disrupt the region and maybe the world at large. What will be the reaction vis-a-vis those pockets? Because, as I was saying, the reason we're talking about the United States is because it's singing quite a different tune right now with the new administration.
Yes.
And the new administration is adamant on not footing the bill anymore. Speaking of that, how will we see those terrorist pockets surviving in this region?
Yes.
The ones that have been created after the alleged Arab Spring, all of a sudden they surfaced. Will we see a diminishing of those pockets? Will we see further escalation? What will be the shape of this region?
Yes. The answer for your question, ma'am, depends on another one. When will ever the powers in the region stop financing terrorist groups? If they stopped financing them and giving them the kiss of life here and there, they will fall on their own. What keeps those terrorist groups and terrorist pockets you have been speaking about alive is that they are getting a lifeline from Turkey, from certain Gulf states in the region, and other countries that have an interest in bringing down Bashar al-Assad and keeping Syria as wallowing in a quagmire of chaos.
Yes. Would that include Israel as well?
Yeah, of course. Israel is safe.
So long as we're all eating at each other, Israel, the Israeli question is out of the question.
Of course, ma'am. And you have to know that Israel even has hosted before fighters from the Free Syrian Army.
Yes. In
areas near Golan, and they hosted them. Israel hosted them and gave them medicine in its own hospitals. So the videos are everywhere documenting this. Yes. They are receiving treatment in those mujahideen are receiving treatment in Tel Aviv hospitals. I mean, Israel is one of the states that has interests in keeping Syria chaotic as it is right now.
Yes. The future, as I was saying, what are you predicting to be taking place within the next few months with vis-a-vis the Syrian file? How are you expecting things to work out?
Actually, I don't think there will be a ceasefire because there are already violations of it right now. And that's why Mr. Staffan de Mistura, the United Nations Special Envoy, and other officials, and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov have been speaking about a mechanism to monitor this ceasefire because there were breaches, mainly from terrorist groups and on the other side from Hezbollah militias backing President Bashar al-Assad.
Yes. So now that we're continuing the violation of the ceasefire, so to speak, what will be the reaction? Will the world stand by and just continue watching thousands of people dying, thousands being displaced, especially since with the economic crisis which is hitting the world at large, a lot of countries are saying we have a problem with refugees.
Yes.
A lot of countries are concerned about the refugees. Unfortunately, the good go with the bad. And people are concerned about who am I hosting? And the person I am hosting, what will this person or who is this person affiliated to and what will they do in my country? This is another issue that people are concerned about.
Yes.
So what will be the reaction?
The reactions will remain the same. I mean, there will be nothing new, most probably. There is no light at the end of the tunnel in Syria. I mean, if the countries financing terrorist groups stopped doing so, we can speak about...
Will they not be stopped? To be straight and to the point, we know who those countries are.
Yes.
Our brothers and the ones that are outside. Everything is very clear and everything is known.
Exactly.
Will they not be stopped?
They have already paid billions of dollars.
Well, they paid billions.
Yes.
And, I know it might not sound diplomatic, but, well, tough luck.
Yes.
But does that mean that they will be allowed to continue in the same direction?
Of course not. If the United States administration of Mr. Trump...
Does it not have power on those countries?
Yes, showed a firmer position than this and tell the allies clearly that they have to stop doing so. And I think they will watch very closely what Mr. Trump says and does.
The United States and Russia are on a honeymoon phase.
Yes.
And maybe we haven't seen this honeymoon phase in quite a long time. And the Russian government wants an end.
Yes.
And I'm stressing the word an end to the crisis in Syria, because it is not in Russia's interest.
Yeah, of course.
And it is counting on the United States' support.
Yes.
Should the situation continue as is, will the United States not support Russia in attaining the agenda, which is to calm things down in Syria?
For the first time in years, ma'am, we see cooperation between Russia and the United States, even by words. I mean, we did not see concrete results on the ground now for this cooperation between the two superpowers. But
well, now that the United States is out of the picture, as you were saying, I mean, it was not in
yes.
Kazakhstan's meeting, for example,
yes.
and this is a different position from what we were used to under the previous administration.
Yes.
Is this not in support of the words? Can
yes.
we not consider this a support of the words?
Yes, yes, you're right, ma'am. And you have to know that the United States recognized recently, only recently, that Syria is a Russian playground. So it keeps its space. It does not want to toe the line of Russian influence in Syria.
Is it because it has other playgrounds?
Yeah, of course, of course it has.
This question,
yes,
I'm wondering.
You have to know, ma'am, that this is what we see
You're the one
now.
that's saying the playground phenomena. Yes. You're the one that raised the issue, so I'm just following up on what you were saying.
Yes, I mean, what we see now in the region is some type of a new Sykes-Picot agreement, dividing influences between major powers, and Turkey wants to have a share on this.
Yes.
Turkey is now appalled by, not by Bashar. Turkey now is not very interested about Bashar al-Assad in as much as it is interested about the clear and present danger facing it on its borders, the Kurds. Now Turkey is really so scared that the Kurds would control this area of northern Syria.
Yes.
And this would pose a great threat to Turkish security and Turkish national security. That's why Erdogan is continuing his Shield of Euphrates operation, military operation in Al-Bab area, and he wants to go beyond to another city called Manbij to seize power there, and is only fighting Daesh there, only to get there before the Kurds of Syria get there.
One party that cannot be ignored in the whole issue is Egypt. Whether it's a blessing or a curse, it's besides the point, but Egypt has a responsibility in this region, it being the pivotal country, so to speak. What should be our role, or how do you see our role in this crisis? Because we are carrying quite a large burden.
Yes. Well, Egypt has always been on the right when President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has been saying that all the world must come together as one hand in the fight against international terrorism, because the terrorism is threatening me today is going to threaten you tomorrow. So no one is safe from Islamist terrorism. Now Mr. Trump's statements are revolving around these meanings that Egypt has always been saying. So and that's how Mr. Trump has clearly announced that he has great respect for Mr. Sisi and for Egypt. And you have to know that Egypt is not on the list of states Mr. Trump has a travel ban. A temporary travel ban on it. I mean, he sees Egypt as a big country in its environment, and he sees Egypt as very essential in the fight against terrorism. And he also stressed that he is going to cooperate with Egypt and many other friends of the United States in the region to fight international terrorism, which threatens everyone.
Speaking of a travel ban, is this a solution to confront terrorism?
Of course not. I mean,
most of the terrorist actions that are taking place in different parts of Europe and even in the United States, they're taking place by people that have the nationality of the country in which they're staying. I mean, regardless of where their roots or origins happen to be. Incident in France, for example, there were French people.
French people, yes.
That have migrated tens of years ago. I mean, so what is the travel ban going to do to confront such a phenomenon?
Yes, the France example has been on my mind while you were speaking about this.
I mean, because this is one of the examples where, I'm sorry, it's not
very clear, yes,
an Arab origin. I mean, it's an Arab origin from maybe the families or the roots, but it's a Frenchman or a Belgian or whatever,
Yes, and is not, and those French people are not facing injustice. They are in a liberal society. They are working there. They are living there. They don't have any problems. What would push them to do this? This is really a mystery. But what you have been saying about whether this ban is going to make be a solution for terrorism, of course not. No one can guarantee anything. But maybe Trump wants to be strong in the beginning and wants to meet his words and translate them into actions, and he's forcing these decisions with very strong will of his. But no one can guarantee anything about terrorism. Can strike anywhere. Any nationality can strike. Not just the Middle East region. European people, like what happened in France and the Charlie Hebdo incident. They were French people, and of course not. But I think this travel ban, as it was announced by the United States, it's temporary. He announced it. This will continue for only 3 months.
Before we wrap up, I'll go back to what we started with, which is the media. The problem is media is one of the strong tools, public opinion shapers and sources of public awareness and information, so to speak. And it seems that the American media will not be working with the current American president. Is giving the American public different side of the story. Maybe not in support of a certain cause as much as it is to contradict what the president is saying. How will this reflect on policies, especially policies vis-a-vis this region?
Yes, but there are U.S. institutions. I mean, Trump is not working alone. And in those institutions, there are policymakers, real policymakers. The U.S. president is only a facade, if we may say so.
You see this with Trump?
Yes, at least for the time being, we can say that the U.S. institutions are still strong.
Yes.
There are hoax inside those institutions.
But the media was one of the strong institutions. Was one of the strong institutions. Will it continue to be strong in the coming period?
Yes, I mean, the media in the United States is free, the press is free, and there are certain media outlets in the United States who are working in the service of the intelligence. Including the Washington Post. Everyone knows this. The Washington Post newspaper, in specific, is working in the service of the CIA. So there are policymakers and policy experts and juggernauts who know quite well what to do, and they are not very happy with Trump's statements and opinions about international terrorism. They are not happy with this because there are figures within the U.S. administration who would opt to use the Islamist terrorism card for political gains.
Yes.
So I think for the time being, the media will, the media in the United States remain opposing Trump for a little while, but by time when Trump forces his plans for the Middle East region, I think they will play to his tune.
A final question, how long will it take to resolve the Syrian conflict?
It's not clear. I mean, the Syrian future is not very, is still vague. There are still troops on the ground, I mean, militias on the ground, armed militants from everywhere. They receive support, they receive money and weapons from many countries. Not many, only a few countries that have political interests and political calculations on the Syrian chessboard. I mean, we don't see a light at the end of the tunnel for the Syrian crisis now. But at least the Syrian forces, the Syrian government forces, are making advances on the ground. Its position, the Syrian position now, is stronger than the past. And that would help it achieve more successes. If only the Turkish and other countries that finance terrorism in Syria stop doing so. And they will stop doing so by their will or against their will.
And maybe this is the message that you better get in line before it's too late, right?
Yes.
Mr. Amr Elmasry, former bureau chief of the Middle East News Agency in Ankara, thank you very much. As usual, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you, the viewers, and we'll see you same time next week. Until then, good night.